Coming to you live, but not really. It is all pomp and no circumstance with Ryder Richards on LetUsThinkAboutIt.com, the amateur hour you should never tune into.
Welcome back. This is Ryder Richards with Let Us Think About It. What if we consider reality as a central point, this kind of acting as a filter or a net that can help us catch the worst excesses of abstract manipulations? It's a pretty simple idea, right? The abstractions that I'm speaking about here, these abstract manipulations, I think they kind of bracket reality, and I'm going to sort of split them into two categories. I think they both draw from reality, which is in the middle. So what we might consider is this abstraction of truth or transcendental, universal, this kind of big notion on one side. And then on the other side, we have this idea of the simulacra, advertising, untethered superficiality. Both of them are drawing from reality, though. So this ends up becoming very much about Baudrillard's ideas of the symbolic exchange and simulacra. But really what I'm also considering here is reality as a version of this kind of concrete pragmatism. And this draws back to people like Kant and Rorty and William James and a few more. And we're going to dig into more of that later. But the idea is that reality is a touchstone from which to filter and limit the most asinine abstract impulses. So for the rest of this podcast, we're going to walk through Plato's Cave, Disneyland, and at the end, I'm going to offer two ways to counter the power of abstractions which are working to overcome reality. But overall, what we're really looking at here is a world, a hypersystem, run by abstractions, and we're considering how this alienation from reality, of reality, will actually precipitate larger, more disastrous consequences. So my little thought here is a simple analogy, because to me this seems like ping pong, where reality is the net, and on each side we have two different abstractions. These are both created and somehow empowered, right? Now one of these abstractions is ideology, religion, or science. And this is people, once again, trying to look for a deeper truth, some sort of system or foundation or framework. Now, and all those things would motivate what happened in reality. Now, on the other side of this is the appearance of things. This might be something like political correctness, advertising. This is the slick, superficial thing that escapes reality altogether. It starts to become its own thing. It really does have great survival qualities, and it has utilitarian uses. But it really never needs to reference a truth beyond itself. And as a matter of fact, it has no truth, having dropped all reference to reality, because reality just kept slowing it down. It found a way, by rising above it, to just skip past it. So here's this net in the center, reality, right? Now you can almost picture the two players. On one side is this kind of stodgy academic, the transcendental universal. And on this other side, the simulacra side, is the young, slick hustler just making stuff happen. Now let's consider that there's two active players here, and reality in the middle is somehow attempting to block some of the low blows. Reality is trying to be at least a hurdle that must be cleared so that, it gives a little bit of structure to this game that's at play. Now, as the net lowers and the players are raised, well, then all of a sudden the players can just sort of smack or roll ideas back and forth with nothing to slow them down. There's nothing to filter them. There's really no pushback. There's nothing that's going against the agency of ideology or the agency of the simulacra. Now, this game accelerates, and suddenly multiple balls are at play, and it's really just not a game anymore. It's kind of a mess because, as a matter of fact, without the net, there's no sides left. So now the hustler and the academic are really kind of having like a ghost moment. They've got their arms wrapped around each other. There's music playing, and yuck, right? So anyway, excuse me. Let's start back and pay attention to something else for just a second. The early version of this idea really comes from Plato's Cave. That's Plato's Cave allegory, where it's kind of like the Matrix. There is this privileged moral compunction, and it is very important to see that the shadows are merely a play of shadows upon the wall, and these are lies spun by those chaining and entertaining you. Now, to become a real boy, but not a manipulated puppet, you should care enough to exit the cave into the light. that is, into the real, into truth. However, in the 1980s, a guy like Richard Rorty and Jacques Derrida, they both kind of ended up claiming that truth is really someone's idea. It's a culture's idea of truth, which you choose to believe. But truth and belief are not actually the same thing. And then Rorty says truth and reality are also not the same thing. That's right, these are different words, right? So language distinction matters. But language itself is also an abstraction, and it gets slippery. And it allows one word to stand for another, and then another, until the real meaning is lost. And in the simulacra fashion, kind of like 1984, all of a sudden the Ministry of Peace makes war. So, back to it. If you ping from the cave's shadow play and entertainment, and then you pong over to truth, if both of those are made up, well, shouldn't there be a net or hurdle that must be cleared in the middle? I'm assuming this is reality. There must be some means to validate that truth is not just a larger shadow play on a bigger cave wall. So what I'm getting to is that without encountering the net of reality, you're jumping from one abstract set of manipulations into another. Maybe you aren't even jumping, right? Maybe you're just rolling downhill, sliding into the Sarlacc pit, thinking it's actually a trash chute that's an exit from a space shuttle, and okay, never mind. But here it is. You can call all this stuff being red-pilled or black-pilled, being awake or going woke, whatever you want to call it. But really, these are just different realms of ideas, which also aren't reality. It's really just another set of constructed beliefs sold as reality or truth, just because it really has better marketing. And this version of truthiness, right, well, it has better propaganda and advertising because it tapped into the deeper value systems of the real. So what's happening here is this is our ping pong players embraced. We can no longer untangle them. This is the transcendental in bed with the simulacra. Which, of course, I'm going to have to wait till next episode to discuss more. But until then, let's talk about Disneyland. Part 2, Disneyland. So let's offer a bit more of a concrete, abstract example. All right, here we go. Disneyland. So Disneyland is a real place pretending to be fictional, which is strange in itself. Baudrillard says it is actually more truthful than Hollywood, despite trying to be fictional. Disneyland is more honestly aligned. It is authentically fake. And people are actually more truthful, more true to themselves in Disneyland than in the city that created it. So Hollywood is obviously a fake land where people pretend for money, and somehow they call that real life. They think it's real. The sad part is that Disney itself actually draws from and touches on a core of moral truth that starts to feel like fiction anywhere outside of its gates. So, the crazy part about this is I'm going to assume that Mickey Mouse has more trust and credibility than our president. I think Disneyland offers a deeply desired truth, a story that we can believe in about how the world should work. That's actually called a morality play. This is a morality play we can believe in. So here's the thing about belief and truth. C.S. Lewis, he calls it the Tao. He says there is the belief that certain attitudes are really true and others really false to the kind of thing the universe is and the kind of things we are. So you can call it religion or humanitarianism, the law, liberalism, or just Disneyland. There is a belief in the way that the world and the universe are, and that becomes the truth for people. Now, when that fairy tale becomes empowered, swollen, muscularized, it develops a popular acceptance, and that, oddly enough, can allow for fanaticism. It has somehow moved from describing, these fairy tales once described how the world works, and it starts declaring how the world will work. So it has jumped from uncovering a deeper truth into manufacturing its own truth. This is when Disneyland's fairy tale becomes divisive. It turns into Animal Farm. It has believers and outsiders. The Mickey Mouse characters, there's those with ears and those without. It's like 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. The hierarchy becomes established. We have rules. But these systems are hierarchical. It goes from looking for external truth to policing its own system. And suddenly, even those with the ears start to turn on those without the gloves. 4 legs good, 2 legs better. And as the appearance of belief conveys status, suddenly the goals are gone, right? The virtues are vituperated. And some version of the Inquisition or the People's Revolution is at play. So this is an insanity of simulations run amok. They're untethered, they're calamitous. And yet really this is a problem of hierarchies and systems just turning on themselves. And so we have moved from the logic of the hierarchical frameworks and the utility of camouflaged advertising into the hypersystem. Now, this is what Hofstadter calls a system that thwarts hierarchical structure. He calls them strange loops or tangled hierarchies, because not every system needs to be a hierarchy, right? Now, it isn't that we have to straighten everything out and systematize it. That's not what I'm saying here. It's more that our current simulacra, our hypersystem, it pretends towards this kind of essential truth whenever it's convenient. And yet, it disregards it for a primordial desire the next. That is, it pretends the logic of a system when it's convenient without actually being systematized. So, the net that can catch all this is reality, and I'm going to offer up 2 ways how.
Way 1, raise the net. Way 1, raise the net.
First, let's start with communication. Jürgen Habermas says that for honest communication, you need a couple of things. Now, he calls this communicative rationality. So here we go. 1, you have to agree on terms. That is, language has definitions and we have to agree on those definitions. Now, the other part is you have to communicate in good faith. You actually have to really try to understand the other partner and reflect that back to them. Part 3, you have to follow logic, such as correspondence with reality. So what all this means is that a chair is a chair. And when someone says literally, they don't mean metaphorically. This is essentially a grounding in consensus and correspondence. This is 2 ways that we function in reality. We both point and agree, trying our best to understand each other. From there, this good faith part means that there's no devious maneuvering. There's no hiding or redefinition just for an easy victory. Redefining is like moving into advertising, propaganda, the simulacrum. Nobody seriously believes them, so it's all being said in bad faith. What this means is this communicative rationality is at least one way to try to raise the net whenever you're interacting with other people. This is to introduce some friction to the play between truth and words.
Way 2, lower the power of abstractions.
A lot of meditation is really about recognizing your body, which can slow down your thoughts by redirecting you into the present, into the physical or the real. Now, when you witness your brain while you're meditating, it often is doing 2 things. One is it's thinking about problems you can fix, and the other part it does is desire things. Now, it can desire social status, sex, food, shiny toys, or just comfort. Meanwhile, your intellect is trying to reconsider mistakes you made 4 months ago, or figuring out how to get you some sex or comfort or food. Or maybe it's thinking about the windows that need to be resealed around the house, and perhaps the windows of the entire building need to be resealed, and maybe you could start a business doing that. I mean, how much do scaffolds cost? I don't know. Would I look sexy on a ladder? So one mantra here, when your brain is spinning, is to ask yourself, who are you when there is no problem to solve? An even more simple thing to say is, there is no problem to solve. So you repeat this for a while, then suddenly, or maybe for me slowly, like after 15 or 20 minutes, you're going to be in the present moment, and you start seeing that these abstractions, these things you were chasing and desiring, they slip away. The need for the moral frameworks can start to seem quite distant. So you have lowered the sway of the abstractions upon yourself. Now, when you come back to reality after meditating, you might question upon your return, like, just how reactive am I, right? How manipulated by artificial mimetic desires am I? And how judgmental and insecure am I? And your next thought will be, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch, because we're just simple creatures. But anyway, for a brief minute there, we finally lowered ourselves to the level of the net. And what happened is we let our body and the present moment filter out a lot of the abstract bullshit that keeps us anxious. This anxiousness makes us yearn to believe. And it's not out of some deep concern for truth or historical knowledge or reason, but it's really out of fear and a desire to fit in with whomever has, a white-toothed smile and some charming insincerity. All right, thank you very much for tuning in. Now, this is kind of an introduction to these ideas, and in the next podcast, we're going to talk about truth and pragmatism, the wizardry of words in our modern time, and then we're going to dive further in another podcast into language and agency with AI and VR, syntax and semantics, which, of course, I consider to just be another slick reality dodge by claiming the superiority of the superficial and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, stick with me as I roll out the next couple episodes. It will start getting a little bit heavier, a little bit denser. It'll also carve out more definitions, and it might just get a little bit more tangenty, right? But I do really hope it will clarify some loose distinctions that were brought up today between things like truth and reality, which, once again, you can't confuse the two, as Rorty says. And we'll also touch very briefly on how self-righteousness steals from truth to play in the shallow pool of status. Now, you know the drill. If you like the show, please rate, review, comment, share, and then share it again, I guess. This is Ryder Richards with Let Us Think About It, reminding you that reality bites. Some of us are kind of into it.